Okay, the most important word that this holiday is connected with would be light, because that really is the way that we are celebrating this holiday. If you think about it, if you go through other holidays that we celebrate, you know, we eat different things, we do different things, right? The mitzvah, the commandment that we have during this holiday of Chanukah is to light the menorah. And by the way, the actual commandment in its glory is actually to light the menorah in a place where others can see the menorah, ideally in a front window so that passerbys outside could see that menorah light. Interesting, right? Okay, so there are two holidays. There's the holiday of Purim, and there's the holiday of Chanukah, that are both the rabbinic holidays that are given to us. Thank God for them, because they come, the last holiday that we had was Sukkot. The next holiday that we have that's in the Torah is Passover. It's a very long break. So thank God that we have these two holidays of Chanukah and Purim to tap into a whole lot of spirituality. But if you look at the holiday of Purim, if you remember anything about that holiday, it's all about eating and drinking and giving baskets of food to other people. Like totally focused on the physical, right? And if you look at the holiday of Chanukah, yes, we eat the donuts and we have the parties and we give the presents, but that's not any part of the mitzvah. The mitzvah itself of Chanukah is the lighting of the menorah, the lighting of the candles. But it's very fascinating, because if you look at the different aspects and the different pieces of the Chanukah story, you find something quite incredible. You see that time and time again, there seems to be this alluding to that something about the connection between women and Chanukah is very, very strong. So before I even go into it, there's for sure some people on here who know some connection. So without like giving whole stories, can anyone just say what they think a connection to women and the story of Chanukah might be? Would anyone like to share? Any thoughts? Okay.
I mean, the story we all know is the destruction of the temple and the lights. Like, I've never heard a woman being part of that process.
Has anybody ever heard of a woman being part of any part of the Chanukah story? Alrighty. Well, ladies, sit tight, because I'm about to blow your minds. Okay, so there's a few different things. First of all, as soon as we light the Chanukah menorah, we are actually told that it's a special commandment given to women to sit and to meditate for 30 minutes while the menorah burns. That, my friends, is probably one of the hardest commandments for me. Even though it should be so lovely, but I mean, aside from this year, which I will not be hosting, but I mean, that is like so impractical when you like just lit the Hanukkah candles and you have a whole bunch of people who you're waiting to host, and you have latkes on the frying, in the frying pan, and you have kids who are pulling at you to come here because they're waiting to open up their presents, and you have people who are literally walking in the door who are just very clueless, and you're just supposed to sit there and meditate. It's very, very challenging. But I will say that I do make a very strong effort to make this happen. And the last few years in particular, really I've been very much tuned into, there are different themes on each night that we can focus on. And we can sit and we can meditate, and the light from the menorah that we can sit and meditate by during that time is very, very powerful. And perhaps that's for another time for us to discuss. But please know that the rabbis tell us that is not a special commandment for men. There is something about it for women, specifically, to sit after the candles are lit for 30 minutes and to meditate. We could talk, if anyone wants to follow up about that, what that meditation looks like, or what are they really supposed to do practically during that time, we certainly can talk about that. We also see that there's two massive Hanukkah stories. One is the story of Hannah and her 7 sons, which is a story that I'm not going to tell tonight, but it is definitely brought down as a Hanukkah story about a woman who was an incredible woman. And then there's a story about a tremendous heroine named Yehudis. And those stories, I'm going to tell you a little bit more about the story of Yehudis, but anytime that the rabbis bring in a story within a story, meaning like John said, like we all just know about like the temple was destroyed and there was this great big war and they couldn't find the oil, and right, like they found one jug and that jug lasted for 8 days and nights, and here we have Hanukkah, right? So anytime that there is any sort of reference to any specific detail of the story that's brought down, it's telling us, dig deeper. Dig a little deeper, crack the code, right? There's something here that's for us to learn about. There must be something. There's not other stories brought about around the Hanukkah story, but there are specifically these 2 stories. Now, the story with Yehudis is a very, very good one to know. She was from the Hashmona'i family. Does that name ring a bell? The Hashmonites, the Hashmona'im. That was the family of where the Maccabees came from, okay? They were the ones, the Judah, the Maccabee was a Hashmona'i. He was from this place. In Israel, you have a town called Hashmonaim. And that was actually, hi Randy, that was actually where they say, like that was where the place where they lived, like actually that was where they had lived, and that place we know to exist today. So she was from this family. She was the daughter of a high priest, and she, maybe like other stories that we hear about, you know, in different stories, she maybe didn't even recognize her tremendous greatness. But one thing about her is that she was very, very physically beautiful. She was very, very beautiful, and she used her beauty to help save the Jewish people. Because what she does is she ends up being very bold and very brave. And she knew that Eliforni, the general at the time, wanted to be intimate with her. He wanted her. And she said, okay, if that's the case, then I will use my beauty and I am going to try to help my nation. And, you know, we could get into a whole discussion. We're going to focus on the point over here. What she did was she came with her little sack. She had a little bag. And she said, okay, I'm going into his tent. And she brought wine and she brought cheese. And she got him very full and then very sleepy. And he fell asleep into a very, very, very deep slumber. She was not intimate with him, but what she did was she chopped off his head and left with it in her little sack. She just walked out. Don't ask me how the blood wasn't dripping all over the place. She had it all figured out. I don't know how, but leave it to the heroine, right? She left with his head in a bag, and she was able to put the head on top of the massive, the wall that people were able to see. And at that moment, the Jewish people knew there's hope. Eliforni is dead. There is hope for our victory. Now, I see your faces, and you're all like, what in the world? Like, what is that story? This is a massive, massive piece of the Hanukkah story. In fact, if you're ever heard that there's a custom to eat, you know, dairy, I don't know if you ever heard this, a custom to eat dairy on Hanukkah, that's why, because of her usage of the cheese, right? That she used dairy in this story. And she was, again, I just want to reiterate this point, that she used her beauty to be able to save the entire Jewish nation. This was the start of their defeat against the Greeks. So that's an incredible, incredible story. Again, major, major details around it, and we're not going to go massively into the story, but we see reference to a woman. There is reference to this woman and to the woman being a part of this miracle. Then we have another interesting thing, another interesting, very key component to the story of Chanukah. During the time when the Greeks were ruling over, and the Jews were kind of at their mercy, they made these 3 horrible decrees against the Jewish people, right? They said you cannot keep Shabbat. No more Shabbat. You cannot circumcise your boys on the 8th day anymore. No more Brit Milah. No more. And you cannot do what we call Kiddush HaChodesh, which is the mitzvah of celebrating the new month. You are aware that there is a lunar calendar for the Jews, and every single day of the new month, when the sliver is very fresh, we celebrate something called Rosh Chodesh, the new month. And they said, no more of that. No more sanctifying the new month. Now, and by the way, they were checking in on the Jewish people. They also had said no more Torah learning. They were checking in, right? That's where the whole idea of that dreidel, right? Seemingly the custom of dreidel comes from, that the Jewish people would be learning or they would be doing their thing. And the second that they heard knock, knock, knock at their door, they would whip out their dreidels. And there you have it. That's where the custom of dreidel comes from. Of course, it's so much deeper than that, but that's where the tradition of dreidel comes from. But I have a very, very obvious question over here, and that is, doesn't it seem like a little bit of a strange misfit? You have here Shabbat, okay? Like, that's pretty massive. I understand why they would tell the Jewish people, no keeping Shabbat. You have here circumcision, okay? That's also like a massive, massive piece of who we are as a nation. And then you have Rosh Chodesh. It seems a little bit like a misfit, no? Does anyone else feel that way? Does it not seem like, can you not pick the third thing, be like a little larger than that? Like, pick something a little bit bigger, a little bit more like in your face, Why the sanctifying of the new moon? So, yeah.
I think it has to do with the calendar. They wanted to maybe have.
Okay, good. So on a very simple level, the way that I've always understood it, is that they were trying to mess up the calendar for the Jewish people. Is that they didn't want the Jewish people. Well, there's actually 2 things. There's also the whole idea of just sanctifying time in general, right? Like, once they had that idea, and they were able to sanctify the new month, and they were able to be in tune with what was going on, everything gets uplifted, and they did not like that. So absolutely, that is true. It still seems like a misfit. It's still, and it that resonates, Lauren. What you're saying is 100% right.
Does it have something to do with what you taught last year about Rosh Chodesh being like a female holiday, and also the Shabbat candles being something that's a woman's tradition? Does it have anything to do with that?
So not Shabbat candles, but Rosh Chodesh, yes. Now,
right, but the Rosh Chodesh, and also, on Shabbat, the women like the candles traditionally, but
yes,
more the Rosh Chodesh.
Right, that's true. That's true. I hear what you're saying about that connection as well. That's true. But Rosh Chodesh is that really, according to, and for those of you who are in my Tour of Torah class, we definitely did reference this, but the feminine energy is always compared to the moon. The moon and femininity are like one. We're not going to go into a whole class about that right now, but this is probably an idea that most of you had heard, even in like the yogi type of terms, actually. Lauren, did they talk about that? Did they speak about the connection between the moon and feminine energy at all?
I have learned about that before. I don't know a lot, but yes, that's true.
Okay, so very interesting. So this is a very Jewish idea that the moon's energy and the feminine energy are very, very much connected. Randy is just chatting as a trained yoga instructor. Yes, connections. We always like it when we say that that's where it comes from. So the light, just, very simply, the light of the sun is a masculine energy. And the light of the moon, the light of the night, it's always there. It doesn't like the sun, even though we know that the sun is always there, but it becomes in the moon, it's really the moon, right? That light of the moon is really always there. But we also know that a moon waxes and it wanes, right? So really that's another illusion over here to the idea of, wait a second, there must be something else that is hinted to in this energy of Chanukah. So we see that there is something tremendous about women and our involvement in Chanukah. And that is that we have to recognize that all of these different references, all of these different things are really trying to tell us what our role is in the story of Chanukah, but really in life, right? Like, what is the woman role in life? And when we look at the story of Chanukah, and we see that it's a beautiful, beautiful story when we see miracles beyond what was natural, for sure. We see that there is the power of the Jewish woman, which is that we always remember that no matter how bleak a situation is, there is always light at the end of a dark tunnel. We have this power, as you know, and if you've learned with me before, this is something that we mentioned also with the story of Passover, right? As Miriam is the one who grabs her tambourine, as the women are there in the fields with their husbands, right? This is a very, very, very Jewish idea that we as women are the ones who always, always, always can hold on to that faith. Chanukah comes at the dead of winter. It comes when the darkest times are here. The days are very short. And we have this commandment to light the menorah. And our connection with this is also that when we're sitting there and we're meditating, what are we supposed to be thinking about? What are we supposed to be what's supposed to be crossing our minds as we're looking into those beautiful little dancing flames, each night, one extra flame, one extra flame. What are we supposed to be focusing on? What are we supposed to be thinking about? So as we think about the power of light, which is everything that Chanukah is about, you know, so many times, like, it comes at this time where American culture and American society, it gets very mixed up. We think it's about like the fanfare and the presents and the loud and the everything, you know. But Chanukah at its core, that's not what it's about, right? It's about the little light. That a little light pushes away a lot of darkness. And that we always can know that there is always, always that little flicker, that little flame, that little bit of hope that we are holding on to. So as we light the menorah, and as we're sitting there and we're thinking about our specific connection, you know, and there's something different when you know that you took part in the miracle, when you know that you were a piece of it, it just feels different. It just doesn't feel the same like when you have something that you're celebrating and you're like, okay, well, where did women fall into this story, right? But here we see from those references that I'm making that we see that there is certainly a whole underlying message here that Chanukah is about the strength that the women have. That's what it's all about. And sometimes it's up to us, right? Lead her ship. Leadership, sometimes it's upon us to make that feeling happen, or to encourage that hope, or to always remind the people around us that there is always going to be light. You know, I was looking back at my notes from all my previous years, and I'm like referencing all different things that are going on in the world. And then we're sitting here this year when, like, who in the world would have dreamt that we still would be sitting here over Zoom? Like, what is this? This is insane. You know, like, we're like, why are we still here? A pandemic, what? Right? Like, I look back at my notes and I'm like, we definitely have years that we've gone through certain things around this time. And then I'm thinking, like, everything just suddenly looks so differently when you're thinking about, like, global pandemic. Perhaps maybe one of the darkest times that the world has experienced in a very, very long time. But it is incumbent upon us, and we need to be reminded that when we take our candle and we light those little flickering flames, we light those Hanukkah lights, we are literally igniting and putting forth that hope and that belief into the world. It starts with a belief in ourselves. It starts with a belief, us knowing ourselves. This will end. There's going to be light at the end of the tunnel. Let's focus on the beautiful things. Let's not get bogged down by all of the terrible things. Let's try to focus on the beauty, the silver linings, as people say, right? It starts with that inner piece of us being able to do that. And then we give forth the light. We light the candle and it spreads. And this mitzvah, actually, it's very, very interesting. There's no other mitzvah quite like this, that we're actually told that so much focus of the mitzvah is on lighting it in some kind of place where it's going to create people to see it. Why? Why does it matter? If it's about me and me believing, I could do that as I sit and meditate. And even if it's about me and putting it into the hopes of my family around me, so I'll speak about that. I'll say something. Why do I have to light those lights and let them shine for everybody to see? Any thoughts? I want to open it up for a second. Any thoughts? Why specifically this mitzvah? You think Shabbat candles, it's a mitzvah to light them in the window?
Well, I think one of them because we were forbidden to do, to practice ritual Judaism when the Greeks were in charge, and now we can. I don't know if is that.
So that
now we don't have to hide.
That certainly is true. Absolutely,
yeah, I didn't know if that
is
had to do with
true.
that.
Listen, there were times during Holocaust. There were times when Spanish Inquisitions were going on. There were times when Jewish people were not able to light the menorah in their windows. You understand? What we call Mesirat Nefesh, what people had to do to light the menorah. Just to get that little bit of light into their own, just lit right there, right? So the fact that we are able to, Heidi, I think what you're saying, the fact that we have the freedom and the ability to light our menorah and be proud and to feel proud and to put it in the front and to display it and to not have to worry that that someone's gonna come and knock on our door, God forbid, that we have a menorah. Now, as I say this, maybe it's arousing some kinds of feelings in people. I don't know, I don't know. There's an incredible story that just popped into my head, just an incredibly beautiful story about how a man during the time of the Holocaust, it was so important to him to be able to light something on the first night of Hanukkah. Somehow they managed to keep track of the calendar then. I don't really understand how they did it, but somehow they made it work. And he knew it was the first night of Hanukkah. And he put himself into great danger, but he was able to create a place, and he was able to cut off from his coat a button, and he saved his little portion of butter from that day that he had, which was meant to that was the butter that they were given with this little piece of bread. He saved his butter, and with the warmth of his hand, whatever he could do, he melted the butter. And he took a little string from the inside of his coat and he rubbed it together with his hands and he put it into the butter, into the bottom of the button. And he created for himself a little candle. And he was able to light the one candle on the first night of Hanukkah. And he said the blessing that night. And he said, God, in a place where there is nothing but darkness, I am still a Jew, and I still have faith, and I'm still going to bring light into a place where there is no light. And he lit that little candle that night, and he, that the story, he survived to tell the tale. So we have the power to bring light. So certainly what you're saying, Heidi, is true, but any other thoughts as to why this mitzvah would be specifically mentioned to be publicizing this miracle?
I raised my hand.
Is someone speaking?
I'm trying to speak. It's Rachel.
Oh, go
Sorry.
ahead, Rachel.
Oh,
Yes.
I was thinking to spread that light to everybody who goes by and sees it, to spread hope and to spread light to anybody who sees it as they.
Okay. So what do you think people are thinking when they see light? You know, it is true. What Rachel is saying, that is what it's about. But then why not the Shabbat candles? You know, we have every single Friday night this gorgeous commandment. Bring light into your homes. This is not the same kinds of light.
It's different.
Yes, Shabbat candles is actually quite the opposite, right? Do it in your bedroom if you need to. I mean, it's beautiful to see them at your table, but if you wanted to, like, you can light candles in your bedroom, it's fine. The whole idea of Shabbat candles was actually created because it was supposed to create more love in the home. You know, that was the whole idea. That was the beauty of it. Chanukah is about spreading the light out, recognizing that we all have tremendous power. We all carry so much infinite light. We all are glowing. You know how like sometimes you look in the mirror? I'm actually feeling it right now. I'm glowing from the silly light that's on. The way that my face is glowing right now, so I'm feeling it right now, spreading the light. So sometimes you look in the mirror and you're like, oh, that's good lighting. Like that's, like I'm glowing, you know? Could you imagine the way that God sees each and every one of us? With infinite light, that He's placed a gorgeous soul inside of us, that we have the ability to go out and to spread light. So Chanukah begs us to ask, what am I doing to spread my light? What am I doing? And especially because we're women, and because now you see that we are super connected to this story, it is incumbent upon us that we think about the light that we bring to the world. We think about how we spread that light. And as the hope is that as people drive by, you know, you feel this way more in Israel than you do in America, but the hope is that as people drive by, they say, oh, look at that beautiful menorah. Look at that, look at those little dancing flames that flicker in the window. That's so beautiful. You know, you can't really compare the little flames of the dancing menorah with all the lights and the action, especially in America. Were any of you with me in Israel around the time that we went on a trip that was during Hanukkah? Anyone here? Lauren, were you?
Yeah.
It was around Israel time, around Hanukkah time. One trip.
It was interesting that we landed in Israel. There was no Christmas stuff out. Like it was unlike the airport we had just left in, you know, the U.S. I just remember that there wasn't all this Christmas decor.
It feels so much more like,
Toned down.
Yeah, toned down. And when you walked up and down the streets of Israel, all you see really is just these little dancing flames, these flickering flames. And these flames have the ability, these little beautiful flames have the ability to really connect. If you take them the right way, and if you look at the flames the right way, and if you recognize what the flames are trying to give over, the beauty of our inner spark, the beauty of what we have to bring, the gifts that we have to bring to the world, right? And you think about those as you look at those dancing flames and you watch them flickering, you connect very, very deeply to those flames. So many years, for many years, I can't say I was like not connected to the mitzvah, because like I loved Hanukkah. It was so fun, you know. It's a very fun time, and it's beautiful, and it's easy also. Like it's an easy holiday to get in the spirit of. But I would say that the last few years, that when I sat down and I really said to everybody, including our guests, I said I really would appreciate it if for the first few moments after we light the candles, I just would ask for just some silence. That's it. Like my kids even, I think it was a little bit of a shift. Like we're just going to be quiet we're going to look at the flames and we're going to pray. We're just going to talk to the Almighty, because the prayers that come out of our heart during that time, when the candles are lit and we're connecting to that flame and to that spark, the prayers that we have inside of us are powerful beyond measure. They are a tremendous, tremendous gift, those few moments. And perhaps that's why the rabbis say 30 minutes after candles are lit, you women sit and meditate. And instead of looking at it as, how am I going to get that done? How is that going to happen? It's like, hey, let's make this happen. Let's make these 30 minutes happen. Let's connect. So I really want to just, end off with this blessing to everyone that, and especially this year, when it just feels, my big line I keep saying is, listen, everything that goes down has to come back up, it's just, if this pandemic is going to end, it's going to end. But really, it's much deeper than just that, it's really going deep and believing and instilling in ourselves that every day that we have is a gift. And that every day that we have the ability to share a little bit of light, to add something to our inner world, to add something to our outer world, to do something with that gift, that's what we've been placed to do. And Chanukah, again, the whole reason, the whole idea of Chanukah is that the Greeks couldn't stand that we had purpose. They couldn't stand that we were connected to godliness. They believed in humanism. That's it. Humanism. That was all that mattered. It was about the physicality. It was about the body. They idolized these things, and they couldn't bring God into it in the slightest. And then when we win and we come out on the top, and we have this one bit of olive oil that's left, why was it so important that that olive oil be sealed? I mean, hello, if you found olive oil, you should be happy. The whole temple was destroyed. Why did they need a little glass jug that had not been touched? You ever wonder that? I mean, really, could you imagine you walk into a war zone and you have a certain commandment you got to take care of? I mean, really? It had to be what they call in Hebrew, shemen zayis zach, pure olive oil with the seal of the Kohen Gadol on it. Well, you see, the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, that was what he devoted his life to. His whole life was given to spirituality. His whole life was about uplifting the physical. He had to take care of all of the details of the temple. Sometimes, most of the time, that was all his focus. He didn't have any other life. There was nothing else that was going on. That was his focus. That was what he was put there to do. And it included taking out the pans from the sacrifices and all the dirty work and everything else that had to be done. But the Kohen was all about uplifting every single thing, every single aspect of it. And so the reason that olive oil needed to have that seal from the Kohen Gadol, from the high priest on it, was so that we as Jews for future generations would always remember the importance of that mission. God gives us a life of physicality. Don't just leave it at physicality. We'll be falling into the trap of the Greeks. Don't just idolize the body. Utilize the body. Utilize the gifts that God has given us. And that, my friends, when we light the menorah and we bring out that light and we're reminded of the victory, the many in the hands of the few, the strong in the hands of the weak, all of these incredible miracles that we saw before our own eyes, the whole story, everything made no sense. And God gave us this gift. so that we should always remember, yesh tikva. There's always hope. There's always, always hope. And fire reminds us of that. Fire always reminds us that little spark, that little hope, that little flame. So those dancing flames, when we sit down, please God, this Chanukah, and I hope that you'll all be able to light the menorahs with your families, in your whoever's with you. If you're alone, it's beautiful to light it alone. Maybe you could hop on Zoom with someone. We are having a Lev Chanukah lighting. Really, the whole point was just light together, you know, like, let's just do this together. Let's light together. Let's ignite again. I just want to reiterate what I said. Ignite our own hearts first, right? Feel that strength. Look back. You know what? Look back at the last 9 months. See the hand of God in places that you would have never seen it. Take a moment to just say thank you. Yes, it's a pandemic. Yes, times are rough. There's plenty to focus on the bad. But there's also the ability to focus on the good. And that's what Chanukah reminds us of. And we as women are connected to that ability. Connected more than anybody else. We always have that ability to turn it and to remember. I was talking to somebody and they were actually starting to tell me that things were going pretty well in their life. I was connecting with someone and they were saying things are going pretty well. And then she said, you know what, I think I'm going to stop here. Jen, I think I mentioned this to you. She said, I think I'm going to stop here because there's so much suffering in the world. How could I talk about all the things that are going well for me? And I said, my friend, that is not the Jewish way. That is not the Jewish way to think. Of course, we have to pray for all of the suffering. There's so much suffering. There's so much loss, and there's so much pain. But we have to focus on the blessing, and we have to thank God for the blessing. We have to continue to feel the light and to be the light. That is the Jewish way. You have to. So I'm going to open up for questions now, but I just want to give us all a blessing that this Chanukah, we truly have the ability, as we sit by the beautiful dancing flames of the menorah, we have the ability to unwrap the gift that Chanukah gives to the world, that Chanukah gives to us as women, but even more powerful than that, that we can unwrap our own gifts and our own flames that we can bring to this world. Amen. Okay, I'm going to stop.